I was Dan's executive assistant, and we had worked together for more than 2 years. We were lovers for the majority of that time, and because of my job, we frequently traveled across the country for meetings and conferences. My husband used videos of me cheating to expose my affair to my dad and exact his ultimate revenge. My lover got out of bed and went to his adjoining hotel room to get ready for the day. We always booked 2 adjoining rooms with a connecting door to avoid suspicion, allowing us to spend a lot of time together without raising any eyebrows. My husband stayed at home, and we were married quickly at the age of 18. After I became pregnant with my high school boyfriend, Alan, my parents wanted me to adopt the child, but they insisted that we keep her and offered their support. Alan helped me through the pregnancy despite the criticism from others, and after a difficult labor, we welcomed our daughter Lauren 2 days after my 19th birthday. My parents almost disowned me, so we moved in with Alan's family. Alan was very close to the girls, but my relationship with them was strained. We frequently fought, and I occasionally resented them for blaming me for the life I had to give up after graduation. After graduating, we both got jobs, got married in a simple ceremony, and moved into a small house. Our plans to attend university were delayed when we had another daughter, Emma. Over the next 10 years, with hard work and support, we both earned university degrees while working part-time and raising our daughters. My job involved a lot of travel, which was exciting because we visited new places, met clients, negotiated deals, and interacted with executives. Even though I was away from home for 3 weeks out of 4, the experience was amazing. I was 32 and he was 41. We quickly became a strong professional team, and I loved my job. Dan Johnson was the business development manager for a medical device company, and we quickly became a strong professional team. I was happy and I got a raise. Because of our age difference and the fact that he was married with 3 small children, I pretended that I tended to travel alone or with another woman and minimized my relationship with Dan. In reality, I was fascinated and attracted to him, and we frequently found quaint restaurants for dinner, wine, and lengthy conversations. A few months after receiving a large sales order, we celebrated with a special dinner in Champagne, and on the night that Dan confessed his love for me, my heart raced. After a brief moment of hesitation, I followed him too. On the plane home, Dan smiled and squeezed my hand, and I acknowledged my involvement. However, when I got home, the guilt hit me again. Alan was happy to see me after a week away, but I avoided his hugs and kisses that night, claiming I was tired. The following morning, I felt guilty, but I justified it as an experience I deserved since I hadn't had the chance to explore relationships when I was younger. I also realized I had forgotten Emma's 11th birthday the night before. Was also sore from being with Dan. It was the first time I had ever turned Alan down for our affair, which started 18 months ago and went on non-stop. Eventually, I overcame the guilt and hid my secret from Alan, emotionally separating from him and our girls. Lying to him became second nature, and I stopped feeling guilty because I had fallen deeply in love with Dan and occasionally considered leaving Alan for him. As our company grew, Dan and I traveled more frequently for work when there were no planned trips, so we made. I argued with Alan about my demanding boss and frequent travel. He frequently suggested finding a job with less travel, but I told him I was learning too much and earning well during rare work events with partners. We also took short vacations together, using conferences as an alibi, and we were careful at work, always acting professionally and never meeting alone using secret email accounts. We also never met in our town at home. I still loved Alan, but we were drifting apart and our affection had diminished. I felt bad and made a mental note to try to make it up to him. We had a difficult start in life, having our first child at marriage and having another soon after. No one suspected anything, and Alan was happy with my career success but irritated by my frequent absences, which left him to handle the majority of the child rearing on top of his IT job. When Amy got her first professional job after graduating about 2 years ago, she was ecstatic and I was very proud of her. At first, I supported her career in every way I could, but I became resentful of the long hours. Amy had a degree in commerce and I had a degree in information technology. We both raised 2 girls while ignoring the challenges because we loved each other so much. Because of her job and the amount of traveling she did, she usually left home in the morning and didn't return until the evening. Most weeks, she would be gone for at least 1 or 2 nights, sometimes longer, and sometimes she wouldn't return until Saturday afternoon. When she did return, she would either work after dinner or just sit in front of the TV. On Saturdays, she would sleep in late and then go shopping, and on Sundays, she would go to the gym in the morning before having lunch with her girlfriends. We didn't spend much time together as a family in the evenings because she was always too busy working to take vacations, so the girls and I frequently went on vacation without her. I noticed that her personality was changing. Instead of being a loving wife and mother, she was now a selfish, frequently irritated, and distant person who shared my bed. Whenever I tried to bring it up, she would quickly dismiss it, saying it was all in my head, that she was exhausted from work, that she was working hard for us, or that everything was fine or that I was worried about. At the end of her first year, I was obliged to go with her to a Christmas party at the CEO's mansion. It was there that I met her boss, Dan, and his wife. We had a polite but brief conversation about nothing before he bowed out and they went off to socialize. Later, I thought it was a little strange that her boss seemed friendly but a little reserved. Not the ogre Amy had described. Amy was Dan's executive assistant, so Amy was also very pleasant. Though I trusted Amy completely, I thought we would have more than just polite, brief conversation. I also sensed that she was a little tense because she had a tendency to talk quickly when she was nervous, which gave her away. I found it strange that she was nervous around her boss because they worked so closely together, and I put the thought aside for later. Over the course of the following year, I was extremely busy because I decided to start my own IT consulting business, and I was also raising our girls almost entirely by myself, so I put all worries about Amy on the back burner. Her life with me was a rerun of the year before. She started traveling even more and growing more aloof from the three of us. Lately, I noticed that she was treating me in a condescending and dismissive manner. She showed me no love or affection, only the occasional gift. It was clear that our relationship was failing, and at the end of the year, I went to her staff Christmas party and spoke with her once more. We had fought together as a team, overcoming many obstacles to get where we were, and now she wouldn't do that, would she? What was I supposed to do? I didn't go so far as to hire a private investigator or hack into her computer, but I started to suspect that she was hiding something for the first time since we met because our boss was a rerun of our previous meeting. My girls were growing up quickly, and we spent a lot of time together. Unfortunately, their mother didn't have much time for them. Both of them were avid soccer players, so every Saturday morning during the season I went to watch them play. It was the highlight of my week, and after the game we would go out to lunch somewhere, usually to their house. I guess I was just too busy to worry about anything unusual that happened between us. Favorite Japanese restaurant and talked about their activities. I noticed that they hardly ever brought up their mother after that. Depending on the weather, we would go out with friends, go to the movies, or take a walk on the beach. After the season's first game, Emma approached me with a new soccer team member. She was a charming girl, tall and gorgeous, with a big smile, long dark hair, and deep brown eyes. She was also very athletic and had done well in her first game with Emma's team. As long as S's parents don't mind, C turned and called out, "Mom, can Emma come over this afternoon?" The woman, who was obviously Callie's mother, turned and began walking toward us. Holy crap! She was the adult version of her daughter and incredibly beautiful. She introduced herself as Sophie and readily agreed to have Emma come to her house in the afternoon. We talked for a while, but I'm still not sure exactly what I said. "I'm glad to meet you, Daddy." Knowing that I rambled incoherently after they left, both of my girls laughed at my embarrassment and then grinned at each other. Later that night, Emma said that Sophie was a very nice person who had been raising CI and her younger brother Tom alone for 11 years after PA's father died in a car accident approximately 3 years prior. Her status as a single mother definitely caught my attention. The following Saturday, while Lauren and I were watching Emma play soccer, Sophie and her son joined us and asked if they could. After the game, Emma asked if Sai could come to our house. "If that's okay with you, Sophie, then why don't Sai come over now and have lunch with us? Do you like sushi?" "Yes, I love it great." I mentally prepared myself to meet her again and was determined not to look foolish. We chatted during the game. She had recently moved to town for a new job and didn't know many people, but she was very happy that Sai had made a new friend in Emma. A deal. In fact, why don't all three of you join us for lunch? I said, thank you so much for the invitation, Alan, but I'll be in the way of your family, so I won't be coming. I was feeling a little overwhelmed when Lauren interrupted, saying, please come, Sophie. It would be really nice to have you with us, and I'd get a woman to talk to for a change. You would be absolutely out of the way, please. She looked at me. If you're sure I won't get in the way, then that would be wonderful. I shook my head and muttered something incoherently once more as we turned to walk to our cars. Lauren turned to me and winked. Lunch was a huge success, meaning that the four girls talked for almost 2 hours. I believe Tom was happy to have the other man around, and we talked a little bit about computers and soccer. At one point, Sophie asked my girls if their mom ever came to watch their soccer games. Her response surprised me. No, she's not really interested in us. She's only interested in her work, and her father is our mom too. He's the only one who genuinely cares about us. Sophie gave me a curious look, and for the remainder of the soccer season, Emma and Cy became close friends and would alternate between our homes after each game. Tom would occasionally visit with his sister after school, but he usually wanted to spend time with me. We would play with computers, kick a ball, or ride bikes. I also noticed that Lauren frequently dropped by Sophie's house, and occasionally the two of them would go shopping. After soccer season ended, we were more and more alone with the kids on Saturdays when they went on their own field trips or to visit friends. Since my wife wasn't usually around, I was essentially free, so Sophie and I spent more and more time walking together. I also noticed that neither of my girls nor I had ever mentioned Sophie to their mother. Since I was essentially a single parent like her, it was much easier for us to support one another with parenting. When I was eating lunch or watching movies, I looked forward to our meetings more and more and realized that I had fallen in love with her. Despite this, we never crossed the friendship boundary. One day, over coffee, I told Sophie that I appreciated her spending time with Lauren because, as you know, she never stops talking about you when she gets home, and Tom never stops talking about you when he visits you. Alan laughed back, which made him realize how much he needs a male role model. She said, I apologize for being direct, Alan, but it seems pretty obvious that everything is not well between you and your wife. We never discussed Amy carefully, so I sat in silence for about seconds. It was a question I had long pushed to the back of my mind and avoided discussing. The truth is, Sophie, if it weren't for the girls, I probably would have been long gone. Things have been really bad for a few years now, and I've tried to talk to her numerous times, but I've hit a brick wall. I believe Lauren first told you about Amy and my marriage, and she somewhat blames herself for putting you in that predicament. I tell her that it's not her fault at all, and that's what started the whole thing. I spent the next hour venting all of my problems to Sophie, and at the end, she came over and gave me a big hug, which was my first real female hug in forever. I'm here for you whenever you need me, Alex, and you know that I only hugged her tighter and didn't let her go. Another year passed, and the annual. When the Christmas party for Amy's coworkers rolled around again, I was on high alert because, although Amy and her boss appeared to be much more relaxed than they had been the previous 2 years, I had a strong suspicion that something was wrong. Toward the end of the evening, Amy excused herself to use the restroom. A minute later, I noticed that her boss was also casually going upstairs, so I decided to follow her and went upstairs to find her. She wasn't in the restroom, so I was about to pass the open bedroom door after looking around the enormous house when I heard my wife say, "Happy Christmas, dear." A man's voice said, "Happy Christmas, my love." I peeked through the door's crack and saw Amy and her boss sharing a passionate kiss with their arms wrapped around each other. I immediately backed away in shock and went downstairs, wondering what to do because I was so furious and felt like I was dead inside. Since I don't have a temper, I calmed myself and decided to look into it and come up with a plan instead of confronting them. Amy was a little breathless when she first returned, and I spent the rest of the evening acting like my loving wife. By New Year's Eve, however, I had worked while Amy was sleeping and had hacked into her laptop and phone. Amy should have known better than to leave evidence on your personal computer, even if it's well hidden, because it's not smart when your husband hacks computers. My worst fears were realized when I discovered a trail of evidence in her work, personal, and secret emails. Accounts Amy had a long-term affair with her boss that started more than 2 years ago. By looking through their email correspondence, I found pictures and videos that demonstrated the extent of her betrayal. I also learned that Amy and Dan had even talked about leaving their partners to be together. Amy seemed interested, but her lover was more cautious. I was a clueless husband who installed a covert surveillance program on her laptop and phone so I could remotely watch every electronic and physical move she made. If I wanted to, I could watch her every move. Now that I needed to protect my business and finances and keep custody of my daughters, I sought advice from a divorce lawyer in the new year. She informed me that divorces are not your fault, so you cannot sue for infidelity, but in a child custody case, the children have the right to choose which parent they want to live with after the marriage ends. She also devised a plan to shield my business from financial payouts. Emma would turn 14 in 6 months, so until then, I could live with Amy and have time to get ready. Had to keep everything from Amy. I told Sophie what I had learned, and she started crying. I thought I should be the one who was most upset and in need of a hug, so I held her for a while as she sobbed and told me that her husband had been driving homicidally with his secretary. She went through his belongings after his passaway and found that they had been having an affair, which made his loss even more difficult. After she recovered, we continued our conversation, and I told her about my intentions to leave Amy. She smiled and encouraged me. I first persuaded my wife that since we were both earning good money, we should sell our small house and rent a larger one while we searched for our ideal home. We would use the proceeds from the sale to make a down payment on a new home, and our house sold quickly. I was only a tenant on a lease for 6 months, and I was tired of sharing a bed with Amy when she was home. I then used a bad cold as an excuse to move into the spare room. To avoid having to sleep with her, I never moved back in, and she never said anything about it. Perhaps she didn't notice, or perhaps she just liked it. After that, I talked to my father, with whom I also confided about starting a new IT company that he owned, and I was his only employee. After that, I closed my own business and began operating my business through his company. Everything was going well until I met Lauren, who was extremely anxious and afraid. Lauren was seeing her first boyfriend, and I thought she was pregnant right away. It's difficult for me to tell you, but Mom is having an affair with her boss. I was shocked to learn about it and momentarily lost my words. What makes you think that? Well, right after we moved, Emma and I went back to our old house to get some things, and she forgot her mom and her boss were there. That's a little strange, but it doesn't prove anything. I said I know about their affair, Lauren, and I've known her for a long time. So why don't you take action against this cheating woman? Emma saw her too. They both shouted in unison. It won't be easy to keep this secret, but until then we mustn't do anything to alert your mother. Emma, who was hiding with earshot around the corner, timidly entered the room, and I gave them both a tight hug because I knew how terrible it was for them to see this, especially young Emma. Can you both keep a very big secret? They nodded. I plan on leaving your mom soon. I'm just waiting until Emma turns so you both can legally choose who to live with. They both grinned conspiratorially, and I asked Sophie to talk. Knowing that the end was near, we enjoyed her absence even more. With Lauren, she had her first boyfriend, and I didn't want her to follow in her mother's footsteps. Fortunately, Amy didn't show up frequently, so we could tolerate her occasional presence and keep our secret. We spent more and more time with Sophie and her 2 kids, frequently going out or having lunch at each other's houses. One Friday afternoon, my wife was supposedly at a conference all weekend, but she was actually with her boss at the hotel, Lauren said. It's about time you two went on a proper date, you idiot. I've already made reservations, so call her now and ask her out properly. She said, holding out her phone to me. What if she doesn't want to go on a date with me? I was immediately filled with jealousy and made an unsuccessful attempt to hide it. Daddy, I'm going to babysit for Sophie today. Oh, really? What's she doing going to dinner with a guy at Brazier Paris? That fancy French restaurant in town? It took me 3 tries that night before my girls were satisfied that I was appropriately dressed for dinner, and just as I was about to leave, C and Tom walked in. Lauren said, "Oh, I forgot," in response to my puzzled expression. After all, we're just friends, and I don't want her to feel uncomfortable. How you ever managed to be smart enough to graduate from university is beyond me. Call her now. Sophie was ecstatic, based on the sound of my voice, and she agreed right away. To let you know that they'll be staying here tonight, so don't worry about coming home late or not at all if you want. She smiled and gave me an overnight bag that was already packed. All of our kids were clearly engaged in a determined scheme when I got there, and Sophie was waiting for me at the door. She looked stunning, and I couldn't talk to Alan. "Do you like it?" she asked, spinning around. "Oh, much more than like it, Sophie. I had the best dinner of my life, and we had a great time in each." I was a little shy and hesitant at first, but at the end of the evening, as we approached her front door, I said, "I know our children have arranged for me to stay the night, but you don't have to." She responded, "I'm counting on you to stay," and led me inside and into her bedroom. I wasn't going to argue with that. At first, I let out all my mental frustrations and felt like I had died and gone to heaven. The following morning, we heard voices outside, a knock on the bedroom door, and a lot of footsteps on the stairs. Lauren opened it and stuck her head inside. "Good morning, you two. We were tired of waiting, so we came in. Breakfast will be ready downstairs in 20 minutes. Oh, and I would ask if you had a good evening, but based on your expression, there's no need." She laughed and smiled. They all left. How did we manage to get such a great group of kids? The breakfast they made was delicious, and spending time as a family was wonderful. Later, at home, I tried to defend myself. "I'm not married to my mother anymore, so she left you a long time ago. What are all of you co-conspirators up to? We all agree that Emma and I need a mother, and Cy and Tom need a father. You and Sophie are meant to be together, so everyone wins, even though I thought it was a good idea, Sophie." To my girls, for what had happened between Sophie and me, they both just rolled their eyes and laughed at my awkwardness. I was completely at the mercy of my daughters. A few days later, at dinner, when we were all gathered together, I announced that I intended to go house hunting. The following weekend, Sophie asked what kind of house I was looking for, and I wanted to be close to the beach, 2 stories, with a large family room, a kids' escape room, and a kids' room. "Maybe, Papa Truth, even you should be able to tell how she feels about you and what she wants." "Do I have any say in the matter?" "No, absolutely none, Daddy." I said, "I also want to make sure it will appeal to the woman I might fall head over heels in love with." And Sophie stared back at me for a full minute before walking over to where I was sitting and kissing me passionately in front of the kids. When we took a breath, they watched us in silence and then burst with joy, dancing around us. It should have a large backyard and a pool, and it should have at least 6 bedrooms in case my family ever grows. When D-Day arrived, Amy announced that she was taking a few days off to attend a sales conference on the West Coast. I checked her email and found that, in order to avoid raising suspicions at work, she was actually taking a vacation with her boss to celebrate their 3rd wedding anniversary on the Indonesian island of Bali. She used the money from her husband's life insurance, and I used the proceeds from the sale of my house as collateral. To make the script look believable, she would leave work a day earlier than her boss and fly to Bali alone. He would fly in a day later, and she would return to work a day earlier. They were becoming lazy, and their gimmicks weren't up to their usual standards, as the entire situation could easily fall apart if someone checked. Amy flew off to her conference, and we started packing and moving right away. She told everyone that they were taking a vacation with their families because they were working so hard that they were neglecting them. The Balon god of vengeance, if there is such a thing, was truly grinning down on me as we moved to our new house where Sophie and the kids had moved a month earlier. The same night Amy arrived, a Gung volcano, an active volcano in Bali, started erupting violently, sending clouds of volcanic dust into the air. All air travel into and out of Bali was immediately suspended, and Amy was left in Bali alone to celebrate their wedding anniversary. Her lover stayed at home, and Amy was stranded there to celebrate their wedding anniversary alone. The volcano made me laugh so hard I nearly peed. Continued to erupt, and all flights were still cancelled, separating the lovers behind the scenes. I checked her emails and messages daily to see how unhappy the lovers were, and Amy was very resentful of Dan as if he was to blame. Occasionally, Amy would call home to tell me how busy she was at a conference and so on, and I would usually ask her how things were at the hotel and what city she was supposedly in. Later, when I was able to remotely access her laptop, I discovered that, while all 6 of us were settling into our new home, She had been frantically searching the internet for information to come up with plausible answers. I had my attorney file a separation document with the family court and obtain temporary custody of my girls from the court after they signed statements indicating their desire to live with me. As Amy's return date drew near, all flights were canceled, and I was concerned about how Amy would handle the situation. One evening, Amy called me and informed me that she had I could tell she was really anxious because she made a lot of connections with potential big sales leads at the conference, and her boss had asked her to follow up with them right away before she left for home. It's also a good thing she didn't call on the video link because I couldn't have controlled myself. I just reassured Amy that everything was okay, and I understood that another week passed and she was still stuck in Bali. I saw frantic emails and texts between the two lovers, and her boss told everyone at work that she had to extend her vacation because of a family. Her boss also called me and expressed sincere regret for keeping Amy away from home for so long, but it was a crucial opportunity for the business, blah blah blah. I waited for his call and was prepared to answer, like a responsible husband to a significant working wife. I told him I was okay and understood, and then I simply asked him where Amy was going. He quickly came up with a list of places. I read Amy his letter informing her of where she needed to be, and my tactic was, of course, to make her squirm and sow doubts in. I was playing dumb when I asked my wife, "Hey Amy, did you read about those poor people who are stranded in Bali and can't get home because of the volcano?" There was a moment of silence, and she said, "Oh." But I kept telling her that I understood everything and kept asking her about interesting places in the cities where she was staying. I knew she had done her homework beforehand, so I always asked her a few unexpected trick questions and enjoyed her attempts to give herself away. Yes, but I didn't pay much attention to it on the news. One of my co-workers was stuck there for 2 weeks. Do you remember Paul Howard and his wife? We met about 6 months ago, and he has to complete his portion of the work remotely via the internet from his hotel in Najua. Oh yes, we're working on a project together, and at least the Grand Hyatt isn't a bad place to be stuck. Amy squeak was heard on the line? Yes, it was the hotel she was staying at. Paul hadn't even been to Bali, but she didn't realize that right away after the call. I was waiting for her at the airport at our rented and now vacant house. I had meticulously planned this meeting, and when she arrived, I was sitting in the kitchen. Amy must have prayed that she could get away with it because my 5 girls and son thought the entire farce was hilarious. Yes, Sophie's children were mine. Finally, after nearly 3 weeks, the volcano stopped erupting and flights from Bali resumed, and Amy called to let me know that her work was over and she would be back on Friday afternoon. Table with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She looked exhausted and extremely anxious, which is strange because she had a deep tan. I skipped the customary peck on the cheek. Wow, you got a great tan on your business trip. Did you even have time to do anything? She blushed. I poured wine into my glass and took a sip. I'm tired, Alan. I just want to go upstairs, take a shower, and relax before dinner. I'm sorry, but we have something to talk about, and it can't wait. Amy thought her game was finally over, and I was about to lower the boom, but she didn't know how to handle it. She reluctantly sat down, and I poured her a glass. I'd practiced the speech numerous times and perfected the apologetic face. So you know things haven't been smooth between us for a long time, Amy. Do you know why she looked startled and only mumbled, "No, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, Amy. However, I can't sugarcoat it. The truth is that I've met another woman, and I want to be with her. That's why I've decided to leave you in order to be with her." She was shocked, and her terrified expression changed to one of silent rage. I kept apologizing, saying that I didn't mean for this to happen, but that you were away so frequently, and I became lonely. How dare you do this to me, Alan, after everything I've done for you? I assume you're amusing her, blah blah blah. She vented to me for about 5 minutes. I can tell you're upset, which is understandable, so there's no use in carrying on the conversation. I'll return tomorrow at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon to continue our conversation because we have a lot to talk about. I left her there and walked back to my new house, where I received a ton of angry voicemails and texts, but I didn't bother to reply. Everyone was curious about how my response went, and for dinner we had pizza and watched a movie with the girls. Turned off their phones so they wouldn't talk to their mother. even though I told them that they couldn't stop talking to her, since it would have hurt her so much more. Sophie and I made tender love that night, and all of my stress and anxiety just melted away. Amy. The following afternoon, when I arrived at my old place with a folder of papers, I was met by a still very irritated Amy and her best friend Claire, a lawyer I had never liked. I sat down at the table facing both of them and read the emails where CLA had encouraged Amy to continue the affair in the early days when Amy was feeling guilty and considering ending it. C seemed to be the spokesperson, and offense was the best form of defense. She went on to tell me in detail how much of a jerk I was and how wonderful Amy was as a wife and mother, how I had taken advantage of her while she was away and worked so hard for the family, and how I should beg her to return because if I didn't, she would clean me out. I know how much this hurts you, Amy, but I guess I'm a little surprised that you're so angry for quite some time. I haven't felt like you truly loved me, and you've been physically and emotionally absent from our marriage for the last 3 years. The divorce took the girls, and I would never see them again. What hypocrites. Last night, they apparently decided that if I knew about her affair with her boss, I would have brought it up. I kept a sad, apologetic, and inquisitive expression on my face. When was the last time we made love? Amy remained silent, but I can tell you that it was years ago. Yes, we don't often engage in physical contact, but I was talking about making love, and I can tell you the exact date of the last time. Years ago, you were away on a business trip and forgot to call Emma on her 5th birthday. She tried to call you multiple times during the evening, but she was so upset that she never got through. I assumed it was a bad anniversary for us because Emma's birthday was 2 weeks ago, and you were away on business and you forgot to call her again. She gave me a guilty look, and ever since you returned from that trip 3 years ago, our relationship has never been the same. I could tell by the way they looked at each other that I had struck the mark because they were squinting at each other and appeared extremely uncomfortable. After all, Amy, we've been sleeping in different bedrooms for about 6 months now, so it doesn't seem to bother you. I can't recall the last time I'm sorry, Amy, but I'm going to move on with my life, and I hope for the girls' sake that we can make our separation as easy as possible. Reconciliation is really impossible. Who is she? I know her. You've met her daughter C, Emma's best friend, a few times. Her mom Sophie and I met at Saturday soccer last year. When you're on vacation, it feels like you spend your vacations at work. They both shuddered. I watched them writhe in their seats. I put a large index folder on the table and gathered some information for you. Tab A is the separation agreement I filed with the court 2 weeks ago. Tab B is the divorce petition you need to sign. The sooner you sign it, the sooner we can move forward. Tab C is the proposed financial settlement, and Tab D is the new lease on our relationship. I believe our friendship grew until we realized we were in love with each other, had an affair, and recently decided to move in together before they could say anything else. This house has a lease that expires in a few weeks, so if you want to stay, you will need to renew it in your name. Tabby has all of the utility contracts that I gave notice to terminate in a few weeks. Tab F has the bank statements, and I have taken 60% of the money out of our joint accounts. The credit cards that were in your name are now yours, and Tab is a temporary court order for custody and child support. Since the girls have chosen to live with me, custody will be handled by me, child. Support will be paid straight from your paycheck at work, and access to visitation has been left open so that we can resolve this as we see fit. They were shocked to see how prepared I was, and Claire started to act like you creep. You've been planning this for a long time, and you won't get away with it. We're going to take your money, your girls, and your IT company. Well, I've been planning this since Christmas, and I realized at your staff Christmas party that it was time to act. I'm trying desperately to remember what happened there. So selling the house to buy another was a shame, Cia said. I only grinned at them for screwing me, CLA. I don't have a business to take over. I closed it down a few months ago, and I work for someone else. I bought Sophie a new house after I filed for legal separation, so it's not an asset to our marriage because I have legal custody of the girls. I can use 60% of the proceeds from the sale of the house to purchase a new home, so I'm not sure what you can do, Claire. According to state law, the children can choose who they want to live with when they turn 14, and they chose me. You are nothing, Alan. I bet you poisoned the girls' minds against Amy, but I wouldn't do that. I'm not such a scoundrel anyhow. Amy did it herself after neglecting them for the past 3 years. You have a lot of work to do with them, Amy, to get them back. It's crucial for their well-being that they have a positive relationship with their mother, who hasn't picked them up. Claire is a good mother, but it's not what they think. She has been almost completely absent from their lives for years. Amy asks herself who provides for them, who makes their school lunches, who helps them with their homework, who buys them clothes, who remembers their birthdays and buys them presents, who takes them to the movies, who helps them deal with problems, who gives them love and affection, and so on. Amy fell silent, and it was clear that she was struggling. After processing what had transpired, the girls asked me if we might meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. It was actually my idea to tell them it's okay since they really don't want to meet you at the beachside cafe. But she just nodded. I left them both and returned to my family the following day, when the girls informed me that Amy had been disparaging me and insisting that they live with her. Eventually, the girls excused themselves to use the restroom and simply left. I didn't understand why she felt the need to make amends. Perhaps I was just a handy babysitter and housekeeper for her for years. But when Alan told me he was going to be with someone else, I was shocked because I thought he loved me. Despite multiple attempts to make amends, he only wanted to talk to me when we exchanged daughters for visits, and my daughters were openly hostile, making visits unpleasant. This infuriated me, so I finally told them not to come unless they wanted to. With my husband at home and my lover traveling, Alan's departure was a huge shock and emotional blow to my life. Over time, I realized that he was right. I had been an absent wife for the past few years, giving Dan all of my love and emotional energy, leaving Alan with almost nothing. It was surprising that he stayed for as long as he did, unable to pay for my house and child support. I moved into a small apartment, spending nights by myself watching TV and ordering takeout. Dan's attitude changed after Alan left me, becoming too preoccupied with. When Dan announced he was moving to a different city for a new job 6 months after my marriage ended, I asked him to never get in touch with me again. I was suddenly a divorced woman, and I couldn't help but think of the line from a Joni Mitchell song. You don't know what you've got until it's gone. I foolishly believed I could have it all. He sent me on business trips alone and said I could handle the clients. Our emotional connection faded. The look on my face said it all. Did you leave your father after all? I know I wasn't the perfect wife and was neglectful, but he left me for another woman, Mom. He left you because you had an affair with your boss for 3 years. I was at my lowest point when I complained to my girls about my predicament, and Lauren looked at me coldly. He was glowing with happiness, just like he was when we were young, and my girls were much happier too, treating Sophie as their mother and viewing me as an obnoxious remnant of their past. While I was driving the girls to their new home one evening, I asked Alan for a chat. We got out of the car and I faced him. Lauren told me, "You know about Dan and me. I'm sorry, Alan. You were a good husband and you didn't deserve this. I was selfish and got what I deserved." I was ashamed that Alan had known all along but hadn't said anything. My life was in a mess. I had lost a good husband, and my daughters were true to his advice to stay in touch. When I discovered that I had caught you with your boss at the office Christmas party last year, I did some research and discovered everything, and I must admit that it amused me when you were stranded in Bali alone. Oh God, I feel so bad. Why didn't you confront me? I was furious and wanted you to know how much I resent you. I discovered that you're not the first secretary your boss has slept with. He has a history of using. I decided that the best way to discipline you was to keep quiet and let things play out. If I made a scene, his wife might divorce him, which would allow him to be with you. I reasoned that you would feel worse if you thought I had abandoned you for someone else. Your plan worked perfectly, and now my life is in disarray. I'm sorry you were hurt so badly, but I don't need to apologize. It was my fault. If you had done what I did, I would have left you behind. I was tempted by excitement and became dependent on it. I tried to stop early, but it was too late. I became obsessed and forgot about you and our girls for a while. My anger has subsided, Amy, and I forgive you. I've also come to terms with the fact that I wouldn't be with Sophie now if you hadn't cheated on me. Yes, I know that's what hurts the most, but our marriage was difficult from the beginning, Sophie. I don't think you're a bad person. You made a big mistake, but he was a skilled manipulator. You didn't have the opportunity to fully mature and experience normal teenage life, including dating, and you're probably right, Alan, that your boss took advantage of your vulnerability when you were figuring out who you wanted to be with. However, why did you have to tell the girls about him? It was too harsh, and it's no wonder they hated me. I didn't tell them, Amy. They discovered it on their own. However, they returned to our old house unexpectedly and caught you two in the living room. I couldn't remember at first, but then the memory struck me with horror. Emma Lauren even told me in detail what they saw. I felt the weight of my mistakes as I walked out to the car that evening. Alan put both hands on my shoulders and said, Amy, don't keep blaming yourself. We face challenges from a young age, becoming parents and having children. My body tensed with shame, and I started crying as I leaned into Alan's comforting embrace. He held me tightly, comforting me as I sobbed into his chest. Eventually, he carried me inside and laid me on the couch. Sophie and everyone else were nice and encouraging me to stay and join them for dinner. You're right, Alan. Speaking of mistakes, I've made another one, and Sophie is pregnant, so we're getting married earlier than planned. You seem prone to mistakes, but you're a good man and a good husband, Alan, better than I deserved. I wish you well. I hugged him and kissed his cheek before leaving, feeling remorseful about why I've forgiven her so easily for several years. Our 14-year marriage is a testament to both of us. Look at the positives. Our mistakes brought us two amazing daughters, a legacy that will never be taken away. Reasons because clinging to hatred can consume you and make you angry. She was receiving a kind of punishment simply for seeing me with Sophie, and despite everything, we still had a bond. My true retaliation was directed at Amy's boss, Dan, who had wooed her away from me. I broke into his computer and sent him an email posing as Amy that contained a Trojan horse that gave me complete access, and I discovered evidence that he had been embezzling from both his previous and present employers. Gathered a lot of evidence and sent it anonymously to the authorities and both companies. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a year in prison. His wife supported him during the trial, but she ended their relationship immediately after I showed her the evidence of his multiple affairs. I went to Dan's prison first, and he didn't recognize me. Hello, Dan. We've met before. I'm Amy's ex-husband. What the hell do you want a prick to deliver a message? The first one is from Amy. Sends her best wishes and hopes you're enjoying your new accommodations, which I personally helped you settle into. You really ought to have had experts encrypt your computer because it only took me 15 minutes to unlock everything after I broke in. After he finished cursing at me, I couldn't help but send it all to the police. I also hope it's okay with you, but I visited your wife and showed her all the compromising pictures and videos I discovered of you and your mistresses. Needless to say, she was furious. I gave her the name of my lawyer who will handle her divorce from your sorry bum, and his expression was priceless. She insisted on getting even, and I couldn't refuse. I don't understand why she wasn't enough for you nonsense. I spread out the photos in front of him. They were photoshopped, but he didn't know that she was telling him that she would never come back here and that you would never see your kids again.